how much did the sales process vary between selling to an American company versus selling to a European or English company?
It's a good question. And I do think, look, ultimately process should be pretty standard across the, the regions. I think that you'll find a lot of times folks will say process is different. And I think like, to me, process is like the steps that we follow, the stages of the, the opportunity, the things that we do along the way to facilitate, someone buying of our product here. But I do think what does need to change is messaging. And I think that's the one thing that needs to be really key. Like, I think, just some things that I've kind of witnessed in my time, but I would say like, if you show up in London with a very American, sounding pitch and message, it will land, it'll land hard and not a good way. Right. And I think actually in Australia, it was great to spend some time working with the team at, Canva and getting a sense for how they think about things. But I think they have a strong aversion to kind of sales, kind of tactics. And they feel like American salesy, kind of culture doesn't fit well, and that's why they've got a lot of these companies like Atlassian and Canva that came out that's, really leaned heavily on like very transparent sales processes, easy to buy, from. That's kind of the key tenets of PLG. And it's largely based on like, they don't want to be sold to, right? Just treat me like a person and a human, right? And so, I think the process still can underpin both of those situations, but how you talk to the people and how you engage with them, that really is, I think, the important thing you need to embrace and understand.
I love that. Thank you for clarifying that. I don't get an opportunity to ask people that question very often. So I'm always interested to see everybody's a different approach.
Yeah. Well, it's someone who's done it a lot, and we've done it with like all different levels of talent. And I do think like, if I had one bit of regret, Colin, is that I didn't actually do a stint abroad in my career. I have always been, largely North America based with, lots of travel, everywhere else. But I think like getting that early in your career is so important. And I think we've sent a lot of folks at both WP Engine, Rackspace, Canva, and even now at Demandbase, we've sent over folks at different levels to some of the different offices. And it is kind of interesting to see that I think they have this like immediate thought that I can just do all the things I did here, there, and it'll work. And so it's almost kind of fun to be able to wait for it and kind of, 3 to 6 months later, be able to kind of pick them up off the floor and say like, okay, you gotta respect and understand that you've kind of walked into a different situation. And so like, you got to adapt and you have to change some of those things, through the messaging, like how you approach things, right? Who you engage with, because those things aren't, kind of always the same. And so it is kind of fun to see that.
I find even, being involved in the sales process, my read on people, whether they are, between Canadian, American, Brit, Australian, you would assume, they're Commonwealth or ex-Commonwealth countries. You would think all these folks are very similar. I find if I'm in a sales process with an American, Canadian, I've got a pretty good understanding of where I'm at, and I can kind of read the conversation. As soon as you throw an Aussie or a Brit in there, you're like, I get the humor, but there's so much, there are enough like cultural differences where, persuasion versus, how they share feedback that I feel like discombobulated almost.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. I mean, Australia was a great example of this because Australia, from a population size, relatively small, I'd say, but size of land, it's actually massive. Like if you overlay it on North America, it's about, 2/3 of it, so it's a big one, but actually everybody just lives on the outer edges of it. Right. And so you can see all those nuances, even, just doing business with Australia as a quick example, because you have like Sydney, which is, I'd say like largely equivalent to like New York, they're a big city, you got Melbourne, there's a big rivalry between the Sydney and Melbourneites, but then you have Perth, which Perth, it's far, far, far away. It's on the other side, everything there is, kind of mined from the earth. It is a bit of like where the oil and gas, companies have all set up. It's a little bit more of a rough and tumble area. And so I think like if you're talking to someone from Sydney, you're getting like lots of polish, and well educated, very smart, and Perth, not that they're not in the less educated, but it's just more of like they're seen as kind of I would say more of kind of the, cavalier mindset because of the, kind of what they do there. And so, it's just kind of neat to see that. You can't paint all Australians the same, right? I think that I got to see lots of nuances in how they talked, how they thought about things, how they shot from the hip. And so I think you're right. It gets even more complicated as you think about, Latin America and some of those areas, Europe as well. There's tons of cultural nuances there.